Hello and welcome to A Celtic World, the YouTube channel for Celtic fans from all over the world, from Singapore to Sandhaven, from Perth to Penicuik, from Kuala Lumpur to Kelso. And wherever you find yourself watching, you're very welcome. And let me give you the times where you can find us wherever you are. These are our relatively still new times for the show. And we thank you for joining this evening. Okay, so I'm joined by three experts in their specific fields, and they're going to take us through the process. So let's have a look at what we're going to talk about tonight. So we've obviously got the game to talk about, and I'm sure there's quite a bit to discuss there. And we'll find out how everybody's feeling and see if that reflects how the comments are going as well. And then we're going to talk about this idea of managed decline. We hear a lot about it, but what is it? What does it mean for us? Is it just, or are we all just crybabies and we should be much more grateful? And then we'll go to the St Mirren game, have a wee preview, and of course, our socials. So good evening, everyone. Robert, how are you and where are you?
I'm in Singapore and I'm feeling a hell of a lot better than I would have done if we hadn't won last night. So quite happy. Pleased to be on the show today.
And good. Great for you to be here. Michael, how are you? Second time round, I believe.
Yeah, definitely great to be back on the show, but what a performance last night for Celtic, or their lack of performance.
Indeed. We'll need to get you on in sort of happier circumstances. And Paul, how are you? And tell us all about the weather now in Australia and how harassed you are and how grateful you are to be here just to be cool.
Well, yeah, good morning, good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. In Perth, it's a toasty 41 degrees today. I'm sitting in my little office with the aircon struggling to do its job, but like the other guys, I suppose up since 3:45 for a 4 a.m. kickoff local time, so a bit of a long day here. But as Robert said, a lot more pleasant for a late winner than it otherwise would have been. So yeah, pretty upbeat given all things considered, and looking forward to chat about it as well.
Wonderful. We'll use it as a therapy session as always if we need to. Okay, let's kick off then. Well, let's get to the team itself. So let's have a little look at this. So, Robert, why don't you take us through the team? Any surprises? Any omissions that you thought you might have seen? How did you feel when you saw the team?
Well, I thought it was quite an odd-looking team. He made one change in the back four, brought in Welsh for Rocky, changed the front three completely. Midfield three was as always, and it made me sort of look back at what was the team a year ago, and I looked at the League Cup final when we beat Rangers 2-1 at Hampden, end of February, and the team that day was Hart, Johnson, Carter-Vickers, Starfelt, Taylor, McGregor, Moy, Hatate, Maida, Kyogo, Jota. So only three of that cup final winning team from about 11 and a half months ago started the game last night, and Johnson only lasted 4 minutes. So I think it brought it home to me again that the amount of change that's taken place in the team has been very, very significant. We lost some very good players, and the likes of Giacomakis, Juranovic, Aaron Moy were very, very seasoned professionals, as was Carl Starfelt, and they've been replaced by younger, I would say, less seasoned professionals. So if you take away Callum and Joe Hart, the average age of the team last night was 23. And I think Rodgers has made a couple of comments recently about the fact that the team is young, and therefore there is some inconsistency that maybe goes with such a young team. The bigger question is, why have we allowed this situation to happen?
All right, and I think we'll definitely spend some time sort of later in the show actually going into that detail of how did we get to here. Michael, you watched the game live. Were you at the match?
No, I wasn't at the match. I was actually writing for a website about the game, though. So I was having to do as much reaction as quickly as possible.
And what was that reaction? What was your overall view? Any issues with the lineup? Did it surprise you?
But I was surprised with Scales and Welsh at centre back, because Scales and Naroki, I thought were making a partnership, but that didn't seem to happen. And then for Naroki to come back on in the second half for Welsh due to his injury, or alleged injury, we don't know how long he might be out now. It just sends a poor message, and such a crucial part of the team. But centre back, we seem to be changing so often. And with Carter Vickers, we brought him back too early, and now that means he's out injured for an extended period. So what's going to happen with Welsh? I don't think Welsh is going to start week in, week out. So it means we're going to have to maybe rely on two centre backs for one position. And if we're playing twice a week, we're going to have to swap between the two alongside Scales. Up front, I didn't think we created a lot. When you look at the game, we get 2 penalties, and that's where we get our goals. We maybe missed the odd chance here and there, but yet again, we're not creating a lot of chances in games, and that's the last 3 Scottish Premiership games we've consistently failed to create goal-scoring chances and score for them. It's quite worrying to see. And when you look at the age of Celtic, how many sides in the world, 23 years old average age it would be, are competing for titles? Like, we're so obsessed with making profit margins on players that we've let our average age go down. You need those experienced players to get you through games. I know we have Joe Hart and Callum McGregor, but I think we need more. It's underrated that we had players like Aaron Moy and Carol Starfelt, leaders in the dressing room who've been there and done it in football and know what to expect. It's just poor management. But we're not asking for a treble every season, but in the transfer market, we're asking to see some sort of improvements in positions, because it's very clear that even at left wing this season, we've seriously downgraded on Jota. With Palma, he's been inconsistent at best.
So, Paul, your reaction to the guys' comments about the lineup, and then if you can take us to the first goal.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised to see 4 changes. I agree, it was odd to see the centre back pairing changed. There's been enough disruption back there. Now, Nawrocki didn't have his best game on Saturday. Part of that was picking up a kind of innocuous yellow early, and then it put him on a bit of a tightrope after that. But I think he's looked decent since he came into the side. He's the one sort of secondary defender who's come in and actually looks confident to step out with the ball, play vertical passes, break the lines, and move us from defense into attack. The rest of them haven't really shown that consistently, and or want too many touches, slow the play down, allow the opposition to reset, and then we're struggling from there. We know we've got problems there. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. As much as I understand the calls for a change up top, I was a bit surprised to see Kyogo dropped. Not because he's been in sparkling form or anything else. Just because he's such a good player. I feel like we should be persistent in trying to get him into. I don't think his form is, his form has gone off a bit, but I don't think that's the major issue. The major issue is we aren't getting service to him. We aren't playing to his strengths, and naturally he's seeing less of the ball, and therefore he is going to be a bit rustier. So his form is a little bit off, but I'm not. The most of the blame for that lies with how we're setting up and the way we are not creating chances and not optimizing for him. Obviously, Ida comes in and he looks lively and he offers something different. And he gets he hit a penalty at least. That's a major tick in the box. But for me, if I was Kyogo, I'd be kicking my heels on the bench, fuming, because Ida probably saw more balls in the channel and tucking in behind in the space of probably 45, 60 minutes than Kyogo's seen for weeks. So I'm not sure why, because Ida was he was offside a lot, but he was trying to run into the channel. There's a chance in the first half where he gets slipped in and Marshall makes a good save, sticking out his leg just at the last minute as he tries to go across the keeper. He's offside, so, no biggie anyway. But that's the kind of service that Kyogo has been starved of and been keen on. Kuhn, not a massive surprise. Abada's sort of not been great, so fair play, give him a chance. He never really took it too early to sort of give him too much grief. and Maeda was a pleasant surprise. Like, obviously, straight off a plane, probably one training session. And we were talking in the group chat, if anyone is capable of getting straight off a plane and into the team, it is Dyson Maeda. So that was a bonus. And again, Palmer's been iffy at best, so not a huge surprise there. But I just think if you make 4 changes and you go with a back 4 like that, and then 5 minutes in, you've got to replace AJ with Ralston, you then look at that back 4 and it's a whole second choice back 4 as far as I'm concerned. Like, everybody fit, that's not your back 4. So yeah, there were concerns with the team sheet, and then AJ gets injured, and the only upside to AJ's injury is it led to a penalty, and that opened to scoring. So I got there in the end. Definitely for me, definitely a penalty. I see commentary online from the other side going, it's just a clash of heads. It's not just a clash of heads. He's way late. And if that's any other 2 parts of the body coming together in the penalty box, it's 100% a foul. So just because it's head to head, if anything more dangerous, I think, right on the tempo. AJ's lucky he didn't spark out completely. He did look like he fell in that kind of sickening way that's happened with him before, actually. So it was great that we got him straight off and took precautions and didn't risk sort of sending him back on, because we have seen a bit of that in terms of players going back on with potential head injuries. But yeah, obviously gives an issue. And again, fair play to Ida. He had a long wait while he was treated. In fact, it looked for a long while, none of us could work out who was going to take the penalty, because Cal had the ball under his arm for a long time. And then Matt O'Reilly was wandering around the penalty spot, and finally the big man spotted it. And yeah, class penalty, what you want, confident run up, pick your spot, hit it hard, put the keeper the opposite way. And yeah, great way for him to get off and running. And once again, a good positive early start, and where we should expect to then push on. It's becoming a running theme, and then it sort of fizzles out, and maybe make heavy weather of it.
Michael, you reacted to Paul's comment about the comments that it may not have been a penalty. Absolute penalty for you?
Definitely. It was so sickening to see that happen to Alistair Johnson so early in the game. I don't know how many people could even contend that, especially considering he ended up in the hospital after the game, and he had to see that Celtic had won from the hospital. So I don't know how anybody could question that. If that happened to anybody's side, they would want a penalty for that. If it's any other part of the pitch, that's a free kick. So it's crazy to even question that.
And fair play to Nick Walsh. He made decision on field immediately. He didn't need VAR, and VAR obviously told him, yeah, you're spot on.
Even though the commentators, I think, for the game were saying, it's a free kick to Hibs, which was crazy for me to hear. And then you see Nick Walsh pointing to the penalty spot. So it was pretty clear that he's seen it clear enough to see that it was a penalty. There was no review for VAR. It was pretty straightforward. So I don't know why anybody's questioning it.
Well, VAR will review it, but they've just obviously said to him, solid decision, carry on.
Robert, Kyogo, again, to Paul's point about he's not getting the service, we're not setting up to be able to do so. Ida's taking advantage of his shot. We've found our new penalty taker, have we? On those, what's your view?
Well, I think the irony was that, we played a lot of long balls over the top. Last night, we did it repeatedly from Scales, Walsh, trying to, and we managed to get Ida in behind on a number of occasions. And, that's the sort of stuff that, as Paul said, Kyogo would have wanted that type of ball rather than into his feet with a couple of defenders on him. I thought that, I thought Kyogo made a positive impact when he came on. He obviously got us the penalty with a nice 1-2 on the edge of the box with O'Reilly. And, O'Reilly often seems like the only guy that's on the same frequency as Kyogo, and they do feed each other pretty well during the course of this season. Kyogo had one great chance. I think he delayed his shot, and he got tackled, the ball got cleared, but it was maybe the sort of chance that he would have put away first time last season when he ended up with 34 goals last season. Right now he's on 11. So, his confidence can't be great for whatever reason, whether it's been the tactics or, there's something else. I mean, he's 29 years old now. Have we already had the best of him? over the last couple of seasons. So he doesn't, maybe he's not such a natural fit for the way that Rodgers wants to play, which is a much slower build-up than under Ange. You know, we don't get the ball across the face of the goal as fast as we did. A little bit too pedantic, I think, in the build-up. But, you know, Kyogo made his contribution last night, without a doubt. And I think as long as he's on the pitch, he's probably occupying a couple of defenders. And that should create a bit of space for somebody, typically O'Reilly. But, you know, I was pleased to see him get on. I think there's so many games, particularly home matches, you know, things like Ross County at home or Bucky Thistle at home. You know, we should be playing with two up front. You know, we're so wedded to 4-3-3. And I can't remember the last time we had a manager, probably Strachan, that was maybe a bit more pragmatic, a bit of a 4-4-2 specialist. And I was talking to one of the guys in the Celtic academy who said that every one of the underage teams plays 4-3-3. They play with two wide men, you know, inverted fullbacks, whatever. But everything is set up for the way the first team plays. And you know, frankly, in Europe, I think it's not pragmatic to play with two wide men when you go away from home in Europe. And I think that's part of the reason why we've had so little success in Europe in the last 10 years.
Michael, you were writing about this last night. What were your views? Were you talking about the tactics from the manager? Do you think it's the players not being on form? We've seen some comments there. Our players just aren't in form. It's interesting comment from Robert. Have we seen the best of Kyogo? Or are we actually in a situation where we need to look to the manager? And I've seen some social media saying, no, Brendan, what we need is tactics. What was your commentary? What were you writing about last night as you watched this unfold?
I just think it's as slow as it's been all season, and even then made quite a lot of changes last night. So it's down to the manager's tactics. Players like Bernabé, Kuhn came into the side. That's different players that were playing about 2 months ago when things were really getting bad against Hearts. But it's just down to Brendan Rodgers and his tactics. I think with Kyogo, if you want to see the best of Kyogo, we maybe need to wait for Maeda to get a run of games and Hatate coming back into the side, because that's the players that would feed him, and we're missing them. Even then, I thought Leila Bada would mean that we'd see more of Kyogo in the box getting chances, but that's another story with Leila Bada and the way he was acting last night. He went straight down the tunnel after the game, despite Celtic scoring a 90th minute penalty winner, which is not what any of us want to see. It doesn't look like his heart's in it, and even though he's such a young, promising player, there's so much going on in the background with Leila Bada. And with the style of play, we looked very disjointed at times last night. When you see the centre-backs on the ball, the rest of the team was so far up the pitch, there was no link really between the midfield. We're relying Callum McGregor and Matt O'Reilly at times dropping deep to take the ball and take us into the final third. We're so heavily reliant on them now, when before we used to use the fullbacks to do that. With Ralston, I think Ralston put in a good performance to come on. That's one thing about Ralston. He gives 100% for the side. He might not be the most talented player in the world, but you see that with his tackle before the Kyogo penalty. He's a great player to have around the setup, and maybe we shouldn't be relying on him as our starting right back, but to have him to come on was brilliant. And I think that's a great thing to see. With Bernabé, I think it was a better performance than against Aberdeen, but anything could probably have been better than him losing the ball for Miovski to score. So there was some good aspects, even though we played so poorly. And realistically, the most important thing was the result. As Hibernian away, we've historically struggled there, especially under Brendan Rodgers. So we really needed that result. And let's hope that can change things. But we all want to see the team playing faster, getting into the final third quicker. So that's for Rodgers to see himself. He watches the team week in, week out, lads. Surely he can see that we're so slow and lagged in our play, and we need to be feeding the forward players faster on the ball. This slow build-up play may have worked around 6-7 years ago, but it doesn't seem to be working as effectively domestically in particular. Teams know how to defend against that, whereas the way we played last season, we'd catch them off guard in the first 5-10 minutes of the game, and it meant that we were able to score early, particularly with the crosses into the box for Kyogo. So we need to be playing to this team's strengths. And with Ida is quite an unusual player in that he might look quite a physically imposing player, but aerially he doesn't possess too much of a threat as you'd expect. Whereas he likes to run in behind, which is similar to Kyogo. And it's interesting that we've signed another striker who likes to run in behind as much. And it begs the question that we sign Ida, but we have Kyogo who's maybe got a similar style of play and that he wants to run in behind into the box. So that's questionable. But the best aspect of Ida is clearly his penalty taking. And that's one of the positives of this season, that we have actually got more penalties than we had in previous seasons, which is rightly, because for quite a wee while we've never got as many penalties as we'd thought we deserved. So that's a positive. And on the whole, it was just great to get the result, and I'm happy with that at the end of the day.
Paul, take us into the second half now. We're coming up towards the hour. So 60 minutes they scored. Do you think we should have done better? Should Hart have got to that?
You can't blame Joe Hart for that. I think we've badly defended the set play. We gave away. So before I jump into that, touching on Kyogo and Ida one more time, the game was tailor-made for those type of players. Hibs played a high line all night. We rarely see that home or away against opposition, and we really didn't make the most of it. We did try to get Ida in behind a few times, but passing was poor, disjointed. Lewis Miller played really high, and second half it was crying for Meira to the ball to be lobbed over the top, because Meira had him for pace all night long. Hardly ever got a crack at that. And the other side, Abada was turning in all the time again and not really getting to the byline. When Palmer came on, we were just disjointed in the final third. Passing was poor. But yeah, in terms of their goal, it was kind of systemic of how we played, in particularly second half. We gave away cheap set pieces, fouls, corners, throw-ins, like Lewis Miller's got a big long throw-in. That's exactly what they were looking for. That's what most teams that play us, home or away, are looking for. They're looking for set pieces to chuck the ball in the box, because we're not great at defending it. We're not great in either box and set pieces. Why is Levitt got so much space on the edge of the box? Hart's completely unsighted. Welsh is sort of stretched out and blocks his view and doesn't get anything on it. And McGregor's drifting from right to the middle, doesn't get there with enough pace to put him under pressure, and no one else comes out. No one is sitting on him for a start. You play the game, you're looking for the quality mid-hit person, the person that had a quality strike from the edge of the box. You're looking for who that is when you're defending your set pieces. You go, we need somebody that's the number one guy that's either on him or is the first to press. And there was nobody on him. And it's a really good finish. Like, he catches the strike well. He's tucked it in the corner. But we've again defended that poorly. For me, no blame on Joe Hart. Wondering maybe Joe Hart is a bit culpable on is that cross in the first half where Kuhn doesn't close down his man. He tracks his man well enough, but he doesn't get any kind of pressure or block on the ball. And there's a brilliant whip from the left side, and it comes right across the 6-yard box. Thankfully, nobody touches it and it goes to safety. But you want Hart to come in, it's in his 6-yard box. It's about sort of chest height. You want him to kind of either grab that or get something on it. But then he pulls out a great save, point blank, straight at him. But he's unsighted again on that. There's a defender between him and the overhead kick. And so he's got very little time to react, and he gets his hands up and he makes a good save. So second half, for me, on the back of the 2 previous games, it was starting to look a bit like the Aberdeen game. I didn't know where a winner was coming from. They grew in momentum and confidence, and they were making chances. They were the ones looking more likely. Lewis Miller misses an absolute sitter. It's a brilliant ball from Newell from the left, wide on the left, and he just gets a brilliant bend on it. Takes all our defence and the keeper out of it. And I actually thought it was Martin Boyle that was going to be on the end of it. And if it was, I think we're down 2-1 at that point. Thankfully, it's Lewis Miller. He gets his feet in a bit of a muddle, and he sort of slides into it, and it just goes past the far post. So, yeah, and we continue to give away soft free kicks. Abada gave away three free kicks in close proximity to each other, and they were all kind of on the wing or in and around the box. Thankfully, they came to nothing. We did defend our box relatively well from those, but we were just inviting pressure on. And yeah, we had some good we did start to shift the ball at points more quickly. And you notice, and I've said it in the last 2 or 3 games, every time we move the ball forward quickly, something happens, something positive happens. So it just bamboozles me that that's not happening more often. When players are willing to break the lines and play a riskier, or to Brendan's point about the transfer market, he said we need to be braver in the transfer market. I would say we need to be braver on the pitch. We need to be braver on the ball. We need to be braver in terms of our passing and our willingness to commit a player and create space and move beyond, where the defensive lines. And on the odd occasion, we started to look good, but the final ball and the final execution was poor. Palmer got to the byline, beat his man, and then missed everyone on the cutback. Yeah. Ida robs the fullback and bearing down on goal, and his decision making is poor. I just think it's been the case for a while. I just think a lot of times our decision making, particularly in the final third, isn't great. And in previous games, we've made chances and fluffed them. This game, we didn't even really create much. And yeah, but for 2 penalties, we would have dropped points again.
Robert, do we do Hibs a disservice here? Have they, like other teams, come hosted us, realizing we're there for the taking? We're not creating chances. We look nervy. We're not confident, but they played well. Did they create more chances for you? Have we done them a disservice?
Well, I was at the game at Parkhead in December, a Wednesday night game, when we beat Hibs 4-1, and Hibs actually had a goal that night. They played some good football. They attacked us, and we picked them off quite comfortably. I thought Hibs sat in for an hour last night, but once they scored, the game just changed completely. And actually, I thought the last half hour, if I'd been a neutral, I would have probably thought it was a pretty decent game, because it was quite end to end. Hibs had some great chances and big misses. I thought we were moving the ball faster then when Hibs came out a bit. They obviously thought they could win the game, and they may well have done. But I thought Ida, 4 or 5 times he got into brilliant positions. Twice he was offside. He'd just run offside. But he did have, I think he'd one opportunity with a head. Another one, as Paul said, where he cut in from the left after he dispossessed the defender. So, I thought we saw some good and some bad from Ida last night. But I thought it was a good game. And I thought, at the end of the day, we kept plugging away. We kept fighting. It was a wee bit, reminded me a bit like that win at Dingwall a couple of seasons ago, when Ralston scored in the last minute of what had been a pretty awful performance. And it acted as a catalyst for the team to then go on, a bit of a and gave us the confidence, which eventually took us to the title after a very, very difficult start to Ange's regime at Parkhead. So, I'm hoping that the team will take a lot of confidence from winning last night. Well short of our best starting lineup. I think the manner in which we won, the reaction of the players, some of the players at the end, I just love Ralston's reaction when we win these games, and he's such a fan. Welsh is also such a fan of the club, and it's good to have them around the squads. And I was pretty pleased with Ralston last night. And as we said earlier, that tackle that he won in the lead up to the penalty, the second penalty, was, it was never his ball, but he made it his ball, and I thought it was fabulous, and that's his commitment. If they all had the same commitment as Ralston, we might be in a better position just now.
Michael, there's a picture, and I think we'll see it in our socials later, this joyful. Take us up, just end us up on the hour and just finish us off with the last goal from a penalty, clear penalty, well taken. We found our penalty taker, that's it.
It's as simple as that. We've been crying out for a penalty taker since Juranovic, clearly. When you looked at even Yakimakis, there was times he missed penalties. We've been dying for that player to just take a penalty and have that confidence. When I was looking into Ida, he's spoken about that. He's a penalty taker. He practices them in training. I heard him saying that last night. We desperately need a player like that. But I would also like to say this is a Hibs team that lost 3-0 to St Mirren at the weekend at Easter Road. And then when you look at one of the other results last night, you're talking about Ross County get beat 5-0 by Motherwell at Fir Park. So that's the two teams we've played recently, Ross County and Hibs, and the both of them have been beaten convincingly by other teams in the league. Why can we not do that? That says a lot about our style of play and the way we are playing and not scoring recently. It's so poor for us to have to watch. And when you're looking at other teams win like that, it's very worrying when you think about it. Even though we all knew there was a crisis at Ross County, we still only beat them 1-0 due to a deflection for the Alistair Johnson goal. And even then, Ross County hit the bar. So it's concerning for me to see the way Celtic's playing. We're just simply not scoring enough goals. And that means that games become closer and it goes to the margin. When you're looking at last night, the last half hour with Hibernian, that could have went either way realistically. And we can't be having every game of the season going like that in certain stages, but where we are giving up so much to opposition sides. I know that's a tough ground to go to historically, but for us, with our resources and the finances that we've put into this squad to be up against Hibernian, and it's going to the last half hour, and Hibernian are missing a good chance. Realistically, they should have scored with Miller. That was a great opportunity. And if that's Boyle, you're right, that will be a goal. We're giving up such great chances, and we're failing to create as much. We're simply worse defensively and worse in the attacking play.
Michael, that's brilliant, because that takes me up into our next little segment, which is this managed decline that we hear about and have been hearing about. And one of the things in conversation with Gav was that he saw people on social media saying people who use managed decline don't know what they're talking about. It's not managed decline. It's no reference to what we're going through, etc. So we've got a little video, it's a minute and a half, and then let's have some discussion, because we've been through the January transfer window. We're playing the way that we are. We're hearing from the manager as well that we're winners, and that's how winners play, to grind these out. Let's have a little watch and we'll have a discussion about this. All right. So, Robert, I'm going to come to you, because we were having an interesting chat about this, because I kind of put my timing of when we started using this idea of managed decline in reference to Celtic, and we could debate whether or not we should be using that term or not. But you actually made a comment about after Martin O'Neill, for you had a feeling that this is where you felt this started to set in. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, I would say that since the days of Fergus McCann, the DNA of our club has been to live within its means, to have money in the bank, never again to get anywhere close to what happened in 1994, where we were close to going bust. And so I think that's a very different DNA from Rangers, who have their DNA is probably debt, and they're comfortable to live with significant debt and to take fairly big risks with their balance sheet in order to try and have success on the field and to in particular to beat us. But they've also done better than Europe than us in recent years. And so I think after Martin O'Neill, the 5 years of Martin, we were significantly in debt, about £30 million. And at that stage, I think when Gordon Strachan was introduced and he had his 4 seasons, which were still successful, but instead of signing the Suttons and the Lennons and John Hartsons for £6 million each, suddenly we're buying Jiri Jarosik and Thomas Gravesen and people like that. So we really cut the wage bill, we cut the transfer budget, we still managed to win 3 titles under Strachan, at a time when Rangers were still, in higher levels of debt than ever. But, they were probably feeling the squeeze even by then. So I think that is the precedent, I think, and I think the origins of it is the fact that we nearly went bust, and we're not going to let that happen again. And the people who are the guardians of the club want us to be a sustainable, organisation. Much is made, I think, of £70 million in the bank. I don't think that number ever really existed, because even if the £70 million was in the bank, you really had to look at the other side of the balance sheet and see that there was significant liabilities, there was significant amounts due to other clubs for transfers that are now paid in a piecemeal fashion. There was about £10 million due to the tax authorities in Britain because we have been so profitable. I mean, how funny is that? We've made so much profit that we're now paying huge tax bills. But so I think you can call it managed decline, and I think certainly for me the Strachan era was very much a case in point, because we had gotten ourselves into an uncomfortable position.
Yeah, I disagree to some degree. Absolutely, we changed the strategy because we weren't living within our means and we needed to get the balance sheet back in order. But we still, the players you mentioned, Jarosik and Gravesen, well, they came for nearly no money. They would have been on decent wages. Now, not what they were used to Chelsea and Real Madrid, but they'd have been on fat wages for the time. We still bought established players, Wenger, Hesselink, Shunsuke Nakamura. We went to different markets, but we bought established international players at that time. We just bought them at more of a kind of smarter price point than we had done previously. For me, it's the strategy of more recent years that seems that the strategy of buy cheap, develop and sell for a profit. Fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with that model. That is absolutely what every club at our level and around our level should be doing. But we seem to have taken it to the nth degree in the last sort of year or so. It's got to be it's 2 things got to happen. It's got to be balanced with some experience, to the earlier point on a team of average age of 23, take out 2 senior players. Guys like Moyes, a perfect example. Look at the the extra sort of expert experience and calmness and guile that he offered on a short-term basis. It was excellent. And we haven't really added that experience. And it seems like every signing has got to be planned to make a profit instead of add in. The other thing is the best signings we've done in recent years have cost us $6 million, 6 million quid, 7 million quid, which is what we were paying 25 years ago. So when all these senior players in the squad got their new contracts, 4 or 5 year extensions, we all thought, or those of us that follow this stuff in a bit more detail, thought, well, this is a leveling up to accommodate higher priced players that will need higher paid wages. And we thought, well, there's money in the bank to do that. The model is kind of getting to a point of self-sustaining where we are selling a few players for pretty hefty profits. We can reinvest that and go again and sort of get the replacement in before the first player's gone. And it never came to fruition in either of the last 2 windows. So there's a disconnect between board, recruitment, and the manager. I think the manager has been offered players and refused to take them. I can only assume that's what's happened in the last 2 windows. So in the first window, he probably took most of what he was offered, he took. And in this window, I think he's basically said no to a bunch of players. And that's why we haven't taken many in, because he's not prepared to fill up the squad with any more fluff and filler that isn't any better than what he's got. And you've got to assume that he had some say in Ida and Kuhn because they've come and they're in. So I think the disconnect is, are the board willing to spend the money that needs to be spent? Currently doesn't seem to be the case. And is the recruitment team identifying players at the right level? Apparently not. So
I think,
those are the bigger issues for me.
Yeah, I think when Ange came in, we actually did get a balance of project players. Guys like Hatate, Jota, they were projects. They really didn't have a lot of football under their belt before they came to us. And and when we did pay $6.5 million for Jota and Carter Vickers, it was following successful loan spells, same as we did with Edward. And that's a model that I quite like, is taking somebody on loan and then paying money for them. I think the board is a bit scarred by the Ayeti Barkas experience in the COVID season, where they were experienced international players. They cost us £5 million each plus whatever on wages, and they were 2 of the most spectacular flops we've had. So I think you're right. They've taken it to the nth degree just now, because there are just so many project players that we've signed in the last 3 windows, and you can't play them all because there's too many young guys. You can't therefore monetize gains from these players. Somebody like Thiago Home, if we didn't have so many project players, maybe he would be getting more games, but there's just too many of them. Yang and O and Kwon now at St Mirren. And so I think we've overbaked it, quite frankly. And the fact is, for every major gain that we make or profit on an Ayer or an Edward, it's just covering up the cracks on 3 or 4 project players that we've signed for £1.5–2 million each that have done nothing. And so net, how well is the model really working if you take all the gains and all the losses and all the wages? But the board is absolutely committed to this player trading model, and they can point to a lot of successes. But I think if we took some time, we could probably list about 20 duds that we've signed in the last 10 years.
The player trading model, as I say, the player trading model is fine. That in broad, high level strategy, it's the players that are coming in that's the issue. I've got, we buy 22, 23-year-old players, but buy them that they're already at a level. They're costing you 5, 6, 7 million. And I agree, getting them on loan for a year and then having the deal all nicely done is perfect. But we don't live in a perfect world. We need a scouting and recruitment team that is picking up these players and willing to take and there is a risk. Every signing's a risk, but they need to be willing to identify them, check that they fit our model and the type of player we need for the team and the strategy and all the rest of it, and take a punt before a top five league team will do it. That if by the time, look at Miovski's a really good example. He's a guy who's in our league, 24 years old, lead the line for his country, decent scoring record in our league, but Celtic fans in general turn their nose up, or they did prior to the last window. Now they'd have loved to have him, but they turn his nose up. Too expensive at 5-6 million quid. But now after the window and he scored against us, he scored against Rangers. Oh, we should have paid the money. He's out of reach already. He will go to a top 5 league, probably Italy, and he'll go for probably 7, 6, 7, 8 million if Aberdeen, drive a decent bargain. So we need to be less fussy on which league they play in. And we need to be identifying them. And I'm not saying Miovski is a player that we desperately want or need, but he's the type of player where if he was what we were looking for, we need to be willing to pay the money. Not look at Kuhn. It took 3 weeks to get Kuhn in because we were quibbling over a 200 or 300 grand. Eventually got there. Just identify the target, work out the price, and pay the money. And if we're buying players at the right level, yes, we'll still make the odd mistake. But if the recruitment team is doing proper scouting, look at Lagerbielke. Like we've bought a player on the say-so of the agent who was selling him and took in a replacement. Nothing about his profile suits how we play. He hits long passes and he's slow. We need a defender who's quick and good short passing, and he's exactly the wrong profile. But we spent a bunch of money on him, and we've given him nearly 15 grand a week in wages, and we're trying to get him out the door, and he would have been out the door if not for CCV's injury. So for me, the biggest problem seems to be the recruitment team, and then obviously getting the board to release the cash.
Michael, sorry, let me just bring in Michael. Michael, as a football journalist, you look at Celtic, are you hearing like some balanced commentary from Robert saying that we've got this 70 million figure in our head? It's not 70 million. It never was. Let's be realistic. But we have money in the bank. But the only reason we have that is because we're a well-run, committed to a model against other clubs in Europe. But as a perhaps younger supporter than us, do you want to see some caution thrown to the wind? Do you want us to look at debt again? Or do you think there's a balance? What's your view?
I think there is a balance, and also it's important to mention the women's team and how they're going to be building a training ground for them. So obviously that's got to be funded. But then also look at the player trading model. That's got to be improved. We've got to start spending a little bit more money in the £67 million. You've got to compare Celtic to teams like Benfica and Ajax, albeit Ajax are in the midst of a crisis this season. But over the whole, they spend a little bit more money and they make a whole lot more profits. Particularly Benfica in recent years, when you look at all the players that came through Benfica, your Oblaks, your Edersons, even 2 goalkeepers, the teams in Europe that we like to compare ourselves against, we simply aren't spending as much money as them. And even Copenhagen were able to just go and get El Yunusi in the summer, and we weren't bidding for El Yunusi because of his age. We've almost become a little bit too ageist with certain players that could contribute to the squad. So we need to improve the player trading model. But there's too much going on upstairs at Celtic when it comes to grumbling over £200,000-300,000 for players. We're so money obsessed with just making profit, but we can't see the longer picture and make progression in European football and buying those players that will make us progress and make larger profits. We need to be spending more on players. And obviously that's a little bit more risky, but is it more risk averse in the long term? I'd argue that. So we need to be spending more money on the squad, improving the squad, our wage bill. We've actually managed to cut our wage bill in recent years, and I think in comparison to Rangers, they have a larger wage bill now compared to us. So we've been taking less risks on signings. But when we have spent money, the signings have been successful, with the exceptions of Barkas and a Yeti. That's 2 Neil Lennon signings, and I don't think that's a coincidence that those 2 players didn't work out in the team. So when we've signed players like Jota, Carter Vickers, but at the same time, we signed them on loans, so we were able to see. But we need to be willing to take more risks on players. We need a goalkeeper in the summer. If we can sign a goalkeeper for a good fee, that could really improve us as a team in European competitions. You talk about Miovski, that's going to be another one that got away. That could end up in recent years to be comparable to Tony at Brentford. Miovski's going to go into better things. We all see Miovski. He's a great player. There is players in Scotland that come through. You look at Lewis Ferguson, and I know he might not have wanted to go to Celtic, but that's a player that goes to Italy, is successful. We miss out on Hickey. Hickey came through the Celtic Youth Academy. I think Hickey's a Celtic fan. We could have signed Hickey. He can play on either side, right back, left back. He's very two-footed. He's an incredible young talent. We miss out on a player like that. We're even missing players in Scotland now from when
John McGinn.
We went. John McGinn as well. The fee for that was a joke. That money now goes to the light show at Celtic Park. So we a lot of players. They've all gotten away from under our noses. It's very clear for us to see that there is a great young Scottish talents coming through, and we're not even signing them because we're too busy looking at some other markets. I think we've actually went through the Japanese market to death, and we've got all the talent we could get from them. You can't oversaturate in one market, but then I'd argue Brendan Rodgers will look to do the same in the English market. Brendan Rodgers is quite English obsessed with the players he signs from the Premier League and the Championship. So from now on, it looks like we'll try and get as many players from there, and there's not as much value down there. So it's a whole lot of situations going on, and even Lagerbielke, as Paul spoke about, for the agent, as we've heard, for Starfelt's agent, and they share the same agent to say, oh, we'll sign a player. That's been going for years. When you look at Dudu Dahan, with all the Israeli players who came to Celtic, and we actually got lucky with one of the players in Leila Bada, but then you look at Hatem El Hamid, he didn't settle in Scotland. So Celtic have developed that relationship with agents. Oh, we're willing to sign a player because you say a player's going to be good for us. That's simply no good enough for a Champions League club to just be looking to get players from agents' comments and how they play. The scouting department, I remember seeing on social media that Gordon Stratton's other son is actually a European scout, which a lot of people didn't know. When you see things like that coming out, we previously spoke about in the show nepotism. There's so much nepotism at Celtic Football Club. I'd argue more than any other football club in the world.
And while we're speaking about, sorry, Dave. While we're speaking about any other club in the world, I reckon we must have the best, strongest balance sheet than nearly every club in Europe. Like most, so Robert's point to say we've got a 10 million. I didn't know this. A 10 million pound tax bill. It sort of beggars, but it doesn't surprise. It's almost not a surprise with this board, but it should beg our belief. You know, every company that every individual should, you know, that knows anything about how to run their finances tries to minimize their tax, obviously through legitimate means. And one of the ways is to spend your money. Like I'm not advocating running us into huge amounts of debt. But there's a balance. There's 100% a balance. Like most clubs run themselves at a zero position or minor debt. Some much more reckless than that. The thing is, however much money, we could argue the toss about how much money in the bank. The thing is, we know there's loads, and the Champions League money has probably not been paid yet, or maybe only just been paid. That's coming in. There's another 60 available if we can win this league, and we've put it in jeopardy. Matt O'Reilly should generate 30 million. He'll be off in the summer, and there's another. But we've every player worth the salt, if they can get back to fitness, is on a 4 or 5 year contract now, and they're not, hardly any of them will see those contracts out. So there's plenty of money if if these players aren't completely injured long term. So we've got a really strong asset base. What we need to be doing is better at risk management. So the balance sheet's already strong. The playing staff is strong, and that adds to the balance sheet anytime you want to cash in on it. So risk a bit of that, knowing. So how we used to operate was, if we got Champions League football, we weren't forced to sell a player, but we might sell a player. If we didn't get Champions League, we had to sell a player, and we did it. You know, Dembele went, Tierney went. And that was a time when we didn't turn the squad and the management over as often as we do. We're now in a position where we've cultivated ourselves as a stepping stone to bigger clubs and bigger and richer leagues. Richer clubs and richer leagues, not necessarily bigger clubs, but you know what I mean. And we're going to be turning the squad over every 12 to 24 months. And we're seeing that with Robert's example of the difference in the team lineup in less than a year. So we've got to get used to that, and we've got to have the bulk of the replacements for the players going out already in the squad, already on the books, already understanding how we're setting up. And that's like players like I've got no issue with signing players like Home looks a player, but he's been asked to step in more often than he probably would have been expected to because of how stretched the squad's got and because we didn't buy experience as well. Bernardo's another one. Bernardo, for me, is O'Reilly's replacement, and it's great that we've got him in the team, but he's basically already playing with him. So when O'Reilly goes, we need another Bernardo because Bernardo was supposed to be his replacement, and he's already a first pick. Unless Hatate is back, and who knows if he's going to come back to full fitness on an extended basis, and if he does, he might want away as well. So it's about managing the playing staff so that they're first team ready as opposed to half and half or worse.
Okay, yeah. So Robert, how does that? Sorry guys, just time check. I need you all. This is fantastic, but just we have some minute to discuss, and we've got social medias as well. So let's put a cap on that one. Where does this leave us leading up to the next game, Robert? Are you going into the next game with confidence? Are we going in concerned? Do we have the measure of other teams? Are we a winning side that will scrape through regardless?
Well, I just want us to be a winning side, and there's always going to be games when we scrape through. So that's 6 league games already this season that we've just won by the odd goal. Last season, in what was a bit of an outlier last season, it was such a dominant season by Ange's team. We still had 8 league games where we only won by the odd goal. So you're always going to have difficult games like last night and like Pataudry last Saturday. We are on a reasonable unbeaten run since those days in December, the shocking performance at Rugby Park, and then an even worse performance at home to Hearts. So we've started to get some results together, but we're going to have to win almost every game. It's quite difficult to see Rangers dropping points against the other teams in the league, and I think we have to just win every match now, and and beat them at Ibrox on the 6th of April. I think looking ahead to Sunday, St Mirren are a good team. They gave us a good game earlier in the season at Parkhead, which we won 2-1 late on when Old scored. It was much more convincing. I was fortunate enough to be at Paisley on 2nd or 3rd of January, whenever that game was. We scored 2 in the first 5 minutes. St Mirren got a man sent off. Frankly, we should have won about 10-0 that night, and it was mildly disappointing that it only ended up 3-0. But I think even under Ange, and there was a couple of 5-1s against St Mirren last season, one in the Scottish Cup at Parkhead and one at Love Street. But in both games, we only really ran away with it in the last 10-15 minutes, where Ange used to use the substitutes extremely well to end up with more comfortable score lines than it sometimes looked after 75 minutes. So I rate Robinson quite highly as a manager. I'm surprised that he doesn't get mentioned for some of the bigger jobs when they come up, like Aberdeen and Hibs, which these jobs seem to come up every year. But I think they can give us a game, and we'll need to play well to win. And
a scoreline from you, Robert?
Yeah, I think maybe 2-1. I mean, one of the greatest Scottish Cup games I ever saw was a replay at Love Street in 1980, which we won 3-2 in extra time, and Johnny Doyle scored 2 fabulous solo goals. And there's so much footage of that game on YouTube. I think about 12-15 minutes of highlights, and it's got the usual hysterical commentary as well, which just adds to the occasion. But I think we'll win, but I think we're at risk. Clearly we're not playing that well. And
I think the last 3 sides we've played against have all been in their own crises. I think Ross County was in a crisis. I think Aberdeen was in a crisis. And I think Hibs are in a crisis, whereas St Mirren's forms began to have picked up in recent games, and that slightly worries me. But we've only scored, 4 goals in about 3 games. So that's deeply concerning. We've played arguably the 3 teams in the league who've got the worst form, with the exception of Livingston. So it's going to be such a risky game at the weekend against St Mirren, who've picked up. They get a great result last night against Dundee. So it's very difficult to gauge how this game's going to go, because albeit we beat them just around a month ago, things have begun to shift in the opposite direction yet again.
A scoreline from you, Michael?
I'll go 2-1.
2-1. Paul, a scoreline, and then let's do your social media to end off the show, because we're at time, believe it or not. That's gone rather quickly. So
I'm going to try and be positive as usual and say we finally got a bit of catalyst and we'll win 3-1.
3-1. Tell us about your social media.
Well, the guys have all mentioned it. Sort of stole the thunder. But this is a brilliant still, and it look at the. So this is in the lead up to the penalty of Kyogo at full pace. he probably didn't realize he was quite that far from the ball. He's not. That's not even a 60-40. That's a 80-20 in the favour of the Hibs player, and he's flown in there and to win it as aggressively as he has and not risk a free kick. Phenomenal, phenomenal from Ralston. As we said, you know, he gives, you know, we'd all give our all, but you can see how much it means. You know, he's not hit the heights that he did during the Ange period, but he's still an able backup, and yeah, flew into that, won the ball, kept us moving, and then obviously Kyogo wins the penalty, and well, he doesn't win it and makes it sound like he dived. He got absolutely clattered, and thankfully VAR came out and on the right side. It's on that. You saw Matt O'Reilly. He laid it off. His immediate reaction was a really strong claim to the ref, and it did seem to take a lot long. Like as soon as you saw it, he's clattered him.
I don't know the ref didn't give it. He could see it.
I think he's sort of maybe like he's moved towards the, you know, where the ball's ending up, like most people do, and he's sort of potentially not seeing how hard that contact is. And then I guess the reason they looked at it a few times is because they were trying to work out, was it definitely inside the box, which it clearly was.
Obviously
on the lines in, and he wasn't even on the line. He was
I
inside.
think Jerry McCulloch was shouting for a free kick on the edge of the box.
He was, yeah. Jerry with his finger on the pulse as always. Yeah, it's a free kick. Oh no, it's a penalty. It's inside. We all saw that. Supposed to get with
gents, if you want really good commentary, you'll have seen earlier that there's going to be a watch along with Gav and Ian, so they'll be definitely on the money. Sometimes if it's a little bit there's delay, but for accurate commentary, for the best chat, if you are not going to CSE, if you're watching on your own, it's good fun. I joined and made my comments known when it was Gavin Bryan. It's a real good fun. Gentlemen, I thank you for all of your participation. There's been amazing. There's too many things. I need to go and watch. I'm going to go to the bar and watch the show over because there's so much information that's come through to you guys. Thank you for all the comments that was flowing through. Guys, we're moving towards that incredible 1,000, Barry. We're going up, creeping up to 900, moving. So if you can comment, subscribe, let people know. Wonderful. Thank you all for coming in, and we'll see you at the watch along on Sunday. Hail, hail, everyone.
Hail, hail.